Good afternoon and welcome to Design Master Training. My name is David Robison. Today we are going to be looking at customizing one-line diagram graphics in the new beta version of our Revit software. If you are attending the training live, you can ask questions in the chat box. If you're watching the recording of the training, you can call or email your questions. Our phone number is 866-516-9497, and our email address is support@designmaster.biz. So we're going to be looking at the new Revit software, specifically how the customization works. So this is going to be very much Revit focused on the beta. So if you don't have the beta for our Revit software, you would need to get that in order for any of this to be helpful. All right, so we're going to be looking at customizing one-line graphics in Revit. All of our graphics are based on families. We do a little bit of stuff specific to Design Master to make them a little more usable for our one-line purposes, but at the base level, it's just family customization in Revit. So a lot of how you customize our graphics to make them look right is that you customize the family to make it look right using standard Revit. So everything that you know or have learned about families applies to our families. And if you don't know about families, there's lots and lots of good resources online for learning about them. So the really important thing to know is that we are using families, and so you just have to use families like Revit does. Let's go ahead and put a couple pieces in here real quick. All right, so when we insert stuff in Design Master, obviously we have these families that are being inserted. You choose the one-line diagram graphic here on the left. On the right, these are your model graphics. So the model families, there's nothing special in there. You just, whatever you're using for your panels and your model, you select them here. This list is a list of families that we've defined based upon this type. And this type here is actually customizable too. We have built in a couple options. All of these, the list of things that you can choose from, is set in this device graphics file. You run that command, and it opens up this text file. At some point, we'll actually put a nice user interface on this. At the moment, it's a text file that you have to modify by hand. It's basically got columns with tabs between them. You can open up in Excel if you want to and modify it there. At the top, we have the types. So that's where we have that panel, transformer, other distribution equipment, and branch circuit equipment. So you can add more types here if you want to have different grouping. And then we have the part type, which pulls from the Revit part type for the families in the model, for which model families we display. So we basically have panel, transformer, and other defined. We're eventually going to kind of build this out to have more options, but this is all we have right now. So if you select transformer, it'll show you just a transformer. Panel will show you all the panels, and other will show you all of your electrical fixtures and whatnot. And that's going to be, this controls what is on the right-hand side of this dialog box here in this model family. So here we've got our panels. If I select transformer, it'll filter it and find all of the transformer families in the project. And if I go to branch circuit, it filters it out and shows me all of the electrical devices in the project. So that's what's controlling what's shown here. And then over here on the left, if I go back to that text file, it's all of these options here. You got the group at the end, so that controls which group it shows up with. We've got a name that this is displayed for the user just to make it look pretty, and then you've got the actual file that's being used. So that's how we're creating that list and how you can customize that list of what's being shown. I'll go ahead and open up this family. If I run the edit family command, we pull it open, and as you can see, we've actually got a fair amount going on with this family. If we go back to that family in Revit, you can see that we've got a couple of these control points, so we can actually resize this thing. We did that to make it more usable for more people so that you can kind of get the sizes and adjust it. If you're making families that are custom, you don't necessarily have to have this much built into it. we did that because we were trying to put together some families that were nice for people to use. It's a little bit involved to get all of these control points working nicely, so you might not want to go through all of this work, but you also might, depending on what kind of stuff you want. The family, again, is just a standard Revit family with all the options that you have for Revit families. There are a couple of things that we do add that are worth noting. The first are these in and out points. These are little detail component families that control where feeders will connect. So you put these in and you set them to be invisible. So you select it, and then over here you can see that it's not visible. So we're not going to show that, but this tells the software where to connect your feeders. So we have an in for incoming connections, and then for the outgoing connections, we actually have two, and it'll put it somewhere between these two. So if you have, that's basically for bus bars. If you want to have it connecting somewhere on the bus, it'll connect between those two there. You can insert those using our software with on the DM1 line. When you're in a family, we have the insert connection point, and now I'll just put a copy of that family in, and then you can change the connection type here. Yeah, so here's all your options for the connection types that you have, whether it's coming in from above or from below. Basically, it controls which way the feeders go in and out, so it knows which way to draw the connections. And then when you have multiple connections for the downstream, if it's offsetting the additional feeders to the left or the right. So here's, it would come out here, and if there's already a feeder here, it'll go put one over here and kind of go until it gets to this point. So that's the insert connection point, and that does control how things are coming out of your families. If I put in another family, we can look at how this one's built. So there's not as many, there's no control points on this one, and it's got one incoming connection, one outgoing connection. By default, we have some styles, a heavy, solid, and dashed for all of our items, heavy and medium and light line types. So that when all of our stuff comes in, it'll use these line types, and then you can set them in your project to what the line weight should be, because everyone has their line weight set up a little bit differently. That's not a consistent thing, but at least we're using one set of line types in our stuff, and then you can map it to yours. So when your stuff comes in, you might want to adjust the line types in your projects so that they match your plotting standards. We also built ours so that we have a solid and a dashed version of everything, where we control the outside, which lines being shown, and they have different line types. That's done with all standard Revit. So if you want it to look differently, if you want different dashing, if you want other things to be in there, if this ground symbol, if you don't like how that looks, if you want your transformer drawn a little differently, it's just a matter of going in there, using Revit to modify that family. All of our families are drawn at 1 to 12 scale, so that's the recommendation for your one-line diagram. We don't do 1 to 1 because Revit doesn't actually handle very small distances very well. So if you do 1 to 1, that means 1 inch in your drafting view is 1 inch when it's printed, and you often want things that are smaller. Your text is 1/10 of an inch. You might have things that are smaller than that, and Revit actually starts breaking when you do things that small, because in the building you're generally not worrying about 1/10 of inches, and it was kind of built for buildings. And so when you get to a drafting view, everything doesn't work. So if you do 1 to 12, that way 1 foot is 1 inch. And then when you go down to 1/10 of an inch, it's 1/10 of a foot, and things work out a little bit better. So we have basically everything scaled up by 12, and it ends up working better with Revit. Just be aware so that when we go take a look at this family again, if the length here, this is 1. We have our families set up to not show any units. So it's 1 unit. In Revit, a base unit is essentially a foot. So it's really 1 foot. But since it's 1 to 12, that ends up being 1 inch. So you can treat the feet in our things as inches when you're drafting everything out. So this is by default 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch tall. All of our families ship in Revit 2018 format. if you're making changes, you're going to want to make those changes in the family in the lowest version of Revit that you currently use on any of your projects, because as soon as you save it, Revit converts it to that new version. So, if you're not using 2018, you can use 2019 or whatever. Just know that obviously once you've converted your families, then they're not going to work in the other versions of Revit anymore. So the lowest version we support is 2018. So that's what we made all of our families in. And in the future, as we drop support for versions of Revit, when new versions come out, we'll convert our families to the newer version. For speed's sake, we do actually make copies of the families and convert them when you put them into newer versions. So if you're working in 2021, we take the 2018 families, convert them to 2021 files, and make a copy on your computer so that we're not converting them all the time. So we'll convert it once, and you'll see that happening. But then in the future, we'll use that cached version. And then if you go make changes to the family, we'll see that it's changed, and we'll update the cache. So always work in the lowest version of Revit that you're going to be working in. In our options, we have the setting under user options. There's not a whole lot in here right now. The main option here is where your customization is set. So this is where we're going to look for everything. The default is in your app data folder here. We've got a button here that you can open it up if you want to go find all the files. So this is an easy way to get to the files that we're creating and modifying. So if you want to get to all your customization, it's here. You can also type in a new folder or select a customization folder to choose a different folder for where you're going to have your customization stored. That's helpful if you've got multiple people. You could put something on a shared folder on your server somewhere and point everything to that customization folder. So that's how you can share your customization. Just put it in a shared spot and have everyone point to it. Currently, when you install a new version of the beta, we actually overwrite all of our files. So if you're going to do any customization, either move it to a new folder and point it to a new spot in user options, or create files with new names so that when we overwrite our stuff, it's not overwriting yours. If you do keep it in the same spot and you're using new names, you're going to have to add them to these customization files here. And when you do that, we'll also overwrite this file. So make a copy of this file before you update so that you don't lose those changes, because you will have to copy that one back in. Looking back in this, yeah, is there a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to, once you guys get out of beta, you said you're gonna stop doing that, overwriting everything?
Yes.
Okay, because yeah, we're having fun playing with it, but we're kind of leery about making too much in the way of customizations right now, because if you have to make changes to the families to make something work, we don't want to have to go back and recreate them. But maybe we'll just wait until we're out of beta.
Yeah, depending on what you're doing. At this point, we're not making a whole lot of changes to the families. And there's actually just really one last set of changes I want to make, where these the input and output, this family lost all the other types in it. I need to get that fixed for the final release of everything. And then after that, I don't see us making a whole lot of changes. In terms of, at least in terms of the functionality, pretty much everything is there. So these ones are good bases to work from. But
okay, good.
Yeah, so yeah, you should be able to work on these and not be missing functionality that we add. Tags and everything is handled with parameters. And these are all in your parameters and your family types. We have a couple parameters that are helpful for the graphics. We have the panel lugs type and the main disconnect type. These are integers. For the main disconnect type, 0 is main lugs only, 1 is the main breaker, 2 is a fuse switch. For the lugs, 0 is no lugs, I think 1 is feed through, and 1 is top lugs only, and 2 is feed through. So we've imported that from our shared parameter file, and then we have a couple of Boolean parameters, true-false parameters based on that. And then we use that for visibility in our stuff. So this, you can see here, we've got the main bus, we've got this breaker, and we've got this fuse switch all kind of sitting on top of each other. And we use that to control the visibility so that when you change the type in Design Master, it actually will change that graphic. So if I go here and select this, and we go down to where that parameter is, if I just manually change it, where's my main disconnect type? It's here. So currently it's set to 0, saying main lugs only. If I set it to 1, yeah, it throws in the main breaker. If I set it to 2, it puts in the fused disconnect. You would never set that manually because the software is actually going to override that. But that's how you can test and see how it's going to work if for your customization you want to have different graphics based upon the disconnect type. Actually changing that, you would use just Design Master. If we edit this panel and we change it from main lugs to a breaker, it will go in and set that value for us. So it changes this main disconnect shared parameter. And then we can come back in here and say, this actually is main lugs only. You change it, it updates that parameter, and then the graphics update as well. So we have that little parameter there to help get the graphics looking right. And so if you're making your own stuff, you can also use that parameter. And just, again, be aware, it's all using standard Revit functionality. It's a little bit tricky to get it all worked out. So you can kind of take a look at what we did. You can obviously see there's a lot of stuff going on in these families. You can use ours as a basis for working, or you can make your own. If you are making your own, you can work on ours, or a lot of times it can be simpler to just take something like our transformer, which doesn't have all of that fancy control points built in. So you don't need those. If it's just one size, but this is the size you want your panel to always look, you can just draw it in and not be able to resize it like we can resize our panels. Because we have that as much as anything to support different people doing things differently. And for your company, you know what you want it to look like, so you can have fixed sizes a little more easily than we can.
Once you've got a one-line drawn, can you actually click one graphic and change it to a different graphic?
Currently, we don't have that. We are going to add that. Someone else has requested that, the ability to swap a graphic. So right now, if I wanted to change this panel, there's no easy way. Well, the way you would swap that is, okay, I've got this panel P, and I don't want to use this. If you delete it from Revit, just using standard Revit delete, the panel still exists in the model, and then you can insert it back in using insert link, and then choose a different graphic.
Okay, that's what I've been doing. I didn't know if there was an easier way of doing it.
Yeah, currently there's not. I do want to build it out so that we can just, one button command, you select this, you select the new graphic, and it'll put it in. And also, it's not cleaning up the feeders nicely, so we're going to clean that up as well so that those get cleaned up for you. Talking about the tags and the labels, if you select this panel, you'll see that we've got a number of labels here. It's actually not all of our labels. So it only has the labels, the shared parameters that you define in the device itself, in the family itself. So you can include as many or as few of our parameters. We include the ones, again, this is not everything, but it's still a lot. We included the ones that we thought people would be most likely to want to use for their labeling purposes. You can get rid of them to kind of clean up your graphics a little bit if you want to. There's no harm in having them there. If you want to add them, you need to add the shared parameters here. You can use the new parameter to add it to a shared parameter so that you can use our shared parameters. Select it, and then you'll need to use a shared parameter file. You'll want to use the Design Master shared parameter file. So if it's not selected, you can click Browse, and our file is under Program Files. So if you go to C, Program Files, Design Master Software, and then under here we've got our electrical RT folder. Here are all of our shared parameter files. Select the one that corresponds to your version of Revit. They, for the most part, are the same. There's a couple places where Revit has changed things, so we've had to change our shared parameters to match. You really shouldn't run into any of that in most of your work, but just be aware that they are slightly different. So we can select our 2018 shared parameter file, and then here's all the shared parameters we have. and you can add the ones into your file that you want to use. The Revit duplicate, these are all the Revit properties on electrical equipment and electrical fixtures that we have duplicate shared parameters that you can use. So basically this would be the apparent current property from Revit, the circuit number property from Revit. So we just pull in the things that they have defined, and we are able to display it then on your one-line diagram. And then all the rest of these are the standard design master values that we've specified, feeder sizes and such. So that's how you can pull in additional parameters to be included on your in your family for labeling. And then we'll take a look at actually creating those tags for doing the labeling next. So for your labeling, we use standard Revit tags again. So there's nothing special happening with our labels other than you just do them in Revit. So if we click on this label here, this is just a detail item tag. And if we edit this label, it has a few of our values in there. So this is the DMER. R is what we use for the suffix for the Revit duplicate. So this is actually all Revit information that we're just showing on the one-line diagram. And again, to add labels to your tags, you do that the same way from the shared parameter file, where we add the parameter, select it from the shared parameter file. And the shared parameter file, there's pretty much one. Revit always has one shared parameter file. Sometimes you can choose a different shared parameter file. Here, it doesn't give you that option. Somewhere in here, yeah, under Manage, if you do shared parameters, this is where you can change your shared parameter file. So probably your company should have one for your shared parameters. So you'll need to swap back and forth between yours and ours, depending on what you're doing. So that's where you go and do that. If I go to Load Family in my project, and I go to my Design Master folder, we have all of our families here. We try to group them with their naming so that they're kind of in some sort of sensible order. So we have a bunch of devices. We've got equipment for panels and whatnot, some feeder pieces, which we'll look at. But then down here, we have all of our tags. So these are all the tags that we, out of the box, include. We try to, label what these tags are going to do. You can actually load multiple tags. So if you just want to see what our stuff does, you can select all of these tags. And now we can select this to annotate, put in a tag, and then you can select here from properties the different tags that we have. And if we search, if I limit it to just the ones that are the panels, but these are the different panel tags that we have by default. So if I just want to do the panel name, I can do that. And if you want to make your own, you can come in here, edit this family, and just start working off this and add the additional tags that you would want to display. So if we want to have a tag, we'll actually do this. Let's go ahead and put some more pieces in here. Let's say we want to show something arc flash related. Why not? Since that pulled up first. Let's just say we want to show the working distance. We'll put that in there. We will save this as something else so that we don't overwrite that one. Then we can load that into our project. And now we could choose the arc flash one that we just created. And it's a question mark because it's not set to anything right now. So this actually is good to note. So we have that arc flash working distance set in the model device, but in this family here, we don't actually have it set for the one-line diagram. It's not one of these options here. So if we do want to display that, we actually need to go modify this family as well and add it so that the value gets transferred from the model to the one-line diagram. So we would need to add that same thing here. So basically, you just go to the shared parameter, you hunt that parameter down, you select it, add it as an instance parameter, I'm going to modify it to put it in the other section because we put all of our stuff, generally speaking, in other. Load this into the project. And now when we calculate, it should fill that value in, transfer it from the model to the one-line diagram, and then the one-line diagram will update that label for us. Yeah, so there's our working distance being displayed now. You'll notice that when we put in our families, they actually come in with some labels automatically. If you edit the family, there's no label there. You can embed labels in your families, but then you can't move them anymore. So we both have labels that come in automatically, and you can actually move them. So if you wanted to adjust your labels, they can be moved like any other label. We do this with a bit of magic under the hood by creating a project that's going to have the family and the label defined. So if I go to my customization folder, you'll see that we've got a bunch of families. And then we also have a bunch, if I expand this, so these are all families still, we have a bunch of projects. If I go back to sorting by name, you'll see that we've got the family name and the project name are basically matched. So we look, and if we see, basically you give us this name, we look for a project with that name. If we find it, we use that project, and then we pull out the family and the label locations. So let's go take a look at that transformer. It's a box with the ground, fed from the top. So here's the family. Here's the Revit project. So we'll go ahead and open this Revit project up. And it's not terribly exciting, but it's got the family here, and then it also has the tag that's inserted. And so wherever that tag is, that's how we know where to put that label. So currently it's here. So if we move where that label is, save that, and now the next time we insert this, it's going to put that label over here because it's going to see that the label has been moved. So it's not going to change anything that's already on the project, but if we put a new one in, it will see that, it basically reads it fresh, and we'll use that setting. So it puts the label over there. So that's how we're controlling where the labels are. So the labels are controlled in a project that has the family and then the labels inserted. And you can have multiple labels if you want to. Panel without a bus, fed from the top. Here, it's actually got the label here, which has the name and the bus size, and then down here we've got the distribution equipment and the voltage. Yeah, just the voltage. So just the distribution system here.
So if we wanted to have our own tags or custom tags, we would be loading them into the project representation of the detail item, right? Into the RVT file?
Correct. Yeah, so if you want to put different labels in, you pull them into the project and put them in here in the right spot, and that's how we know which label that you want to use.
Okay, got it.
And when it uses this project file, it pulls the name of the family and the name of the label family from the project. It actually goes out to, but it doesn't use this definition. It goes out to the folder and looks for a definition there and pulls it in. That's important because if you go make changes to that family or to that label, we're going to pull the changes automatically. Otherwise, you'd have to make your changes and then load those changes back into all of your projects, which can get very, very tedious. So it doesn't pull from the project. It actually pulls from the file on disk instead. So if you do
okay, got it. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I say if you make changes, you don't need to update all of your projects with the tiny little change you made. It'll get seen automatically, basically.
Okay, got it. So like if we want to make graphical changes, do it to the family. If we want to make changes to the tag itself, make it to the tag family. If we want to make changes to the default tags when a device is placed, do it in the RVT file.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so all of this customization, obviously, there's a lot of little details like that you kind of have to piece your way through. So that's just how the customization has to be. But once you get it set up right, it should all come in nicely. We've been looking at the kind of the device families. We also have families for these feeder segments. Now we use families for these rather than just a detail line, mainly so that we actually have a mask included so that when they cross over each other, they hide each other nicely. So if I actually put in another circuit, so these two feeders are crossing, obviously, and it puts in the mask there for us. So that's why we use families. We use families so that we can have the mask. So if you go edit this family, this is what our family for our feeder segments look like. It's basically a line with a mask here. If you are working on these feeder segments, it's important to have this segment length option. That's what we use to actually resize that length. So you'll want to use one of ours as the basis if you're going to make any customizations. More likely, you would make a change to something like this one, which actually has this graphic included. And that graphic you can also move back and forth. And if we edit this family, it has the segment length as a parameter. It also has the symbol location as a parameter. And so that's what controls where that symbol goes. You as the user can choose it, set it, and the software also uses this to set a default location for that to attempt to, because basically this is generally going to be your overcurrent protection to get it in the right spot. If you're making any changes to the segment families, the size that you're drawing it at, this is what Design Master assumes is like the minimum size for that segment. So when it puts it in, it will make it at least this long when drawing in your default feeder. So that if you have some short segments, it'll make it this long and then do its best to adjust. So you want to kind of draw this kind of at the smallest size, knowing that it'll then make it bigger and that you can always make it bigger. And again, for this, it's a fair bit of drafting to get everything right. We've got the various pieces, we've got the mask happening, and then you've got your planes here for your reference planes, so everything slides together nicely. So if you do want to do extensive customization, you do need to make sure that you know how Revit families work. There's a question, is the one-line diagram drawn using the drafting view? Yes, the one-line diagram is in the drafting view. So the way our one-line diagram works is that it's a drafting view. It's a representation of what you've got in the model. We transfer the data into the drafting view for you, but we do it all in a drafting view. So all of the customization is that we are doing drafting detail item. I think they're detail item families. Another question, can you help us connect an ATS so the feeders avoid overlapping? And can you share any best practices with the graphic symbols? So the ATS, you get your feeders overlapping. Let me see if I can pull up my ATS.
What I'm talking about is, I don't know what orientation, I don't know if it's the orientation of the symbol, but when I start adding the generator on top of the utility feed, they all seem to sort of there's got to be a better way. I must be doing it, maybe because I'm left-handed, in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So the transfer switch has two incoming connections for source 1 and for source 2. Basically, in order to get it to draft nicely, you want feeder 1 is going to come in on the left and feeder 2 is going to come in on the right. So if things are overlapping, it's probably a case of where those two, where you've got feeder 2 coming in on the left and feeder 1 coming in on the right.
So does that mean I have to sequentially connect these? So in first, in 2 second, out last? Does that have anything to do with it?
No, let's actually, so that's how it's defined. Let's see if we can make one in Revit. So there's our transfer switch. And if we put something upstream of it, so if we connect, if we power that transfer switch from that panel, And then we'll just put another panel in. Obviously, you'd use a generator or something, but for our purposes, we'll just do this, and we'll power transfer switch from that. So I'm guessing you end up with something where these feeders are overlapping. Is that correct? Where they're kind of drawn over?
Yeah, that's mostly correct. So I have them, in different orientations. I add the transfer switch, and then it seems like it's somehow crosses somehow. Maybe I'm just not doing it. Maybe I need to do it more sequentially.
Yeah. So it's going to connect. If we go and edit this transfer switch, we have the first feeder and the first upstream connection, and then the second one. And the first one is, we have them drawn so that that's kind of intended to be like the normal situation. So that the switch is currently connected to that one. So this will be your first, and this will be your second. So if we actually try to figure out how to best demonstrate some of what you can do.
So now if we add a generator or whatever on the backside of that, just for the third purpose, we'll see how that, maybe that's the...
So say I swap these two, so this one, which is connected to number 2 here, and if I redraw this feeder, so if I put those 2 feeders back in their default location, this is where you're kind of getting that overlap that you don't want.
Yeah, I may be doing that, and with the generator, it makes it a little, sometimes depending if the generator was above those 2, then I'm getting lines kind of all wacky. So yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's what's going on, and that's kind of what you have to play with.
Okay, that's fine. I can take it from there. I don't want to tie everybody else's up. But the other one was, the other question I had, the second part of the question was, I was adding some CT metering in off a transformer between a disconnect, and it seemed like it replaced the feeder. But then when I tried to change the feeder, I couldn't get the I don't know. There was some I must be using the graphics wrong. That's what I was just wondering.
Yeah, I'll show you what's going on there. So we put in the feeders, and we always do it kind of like our best. Actually, with this, it's not even our best guess. It's just some sort of connection. We have the feeder redraw, which allows you to just draw the feeder however you want. So if you're like, okay, I'm connecting this. These have the same name, so it's not obvious which one I want to draw, but I'm doing feeder 1 from this guy. And then if you do the feeder redraw, you can, at that point, just draw it in however you want it. But you could do something like that. And if it doesn't come in right, just use the feeder redraw to draw it how it should look. So then the graphics, it did not put in my overcurrent protection. I'm going to try that again. This one at least has overcurrent protection. We'll pull it over here. So the graphic insert commands are for putting additional graphics on these feeders, because you'll have things like meters. Meters is the one example I can think of. But any other graphic you want to put on your feeder. And what it's going to do is it's going to replace this segment with a new segment that has that graphic in it. So if you want to put in a meter and you want it on this line here, you actually kind of need a second segment to insert it onto. Because if you insert it here, it's actually going to replace that breaker.
Yeah, that's what I didn't. Okay, I think you're right. I think it was a segment issue with
and so that's probably what you're seeing. Yeah. So you just need to get a second item in there. If I use my segment redraw, I'm going to select this segment. So now we have an additional segment. And now if we do our graphic insert, we say, okay, let's put in a meter. And then we can select this other segment. And so now you've got your breaker and then your meter.
Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what you need to do. You need that second segment. Because if we come in here and say we don't want a breaker, we want a fuse switch or something, we can come in here, select this, and it'll swap out that graphic. So the graphic insert is changing that segment.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Times, obviously, you'd want to use it, and then times when you don't want to use it, so then you just need the additional segment in there.
On the ATS, the feeder 1 versus feeder 2, is it associated with which connector the power system is associated with, or is it purely just which one you connect first and which one you connect second?
It's which one is first and second, and then it's actually set here so that once it's defined in the software, we kind of have, or in the, once it's defined, we say, okay, this is always connection 1, this is always connection 2. you can then swap them. If you're like, it's connecting, it has the 1 and 2 switched from how I would like it to be. We actually have this swap feeder here. Let me go in here and change this name here just so that we can see the difference. If we go back to this transfer switch, so we have panel P here and then panel L is feeder 2. If we do swap feeders, it'll take, so now this is the feeder from L is the first feeder, P is now the second feeder. So that's how you can control which one is the primary and which one's the secondary.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I saw you use that circuit insert command, and I haven't used that one yet. I was wondering what context that you'd use that. Is that simply just for graphic representation of a feeder? There's no model representation of it?
Correct. Well, actually, you can do 2 ways. It's for something, if you want to put in a feeder, if you run the circuit insert and you select, you actually can link it to a specific circuit. So it'll just be a feeder for that circuit with nothing on the end of it. So you can link it to a circuit, or you can just draft it in if you just need to draw a circuit and you want it to look like all your other circuits. You just run that and it'll just draw something in that's purely graphical at that point and not linked to the model at all.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if that would be like what you were thinking for maybe like an existing building or something like that, where it's like we don't really need to have all the back of house calculations going on, but we do need to show that we're connecting to an existing switchboard that's got these many spaces occupied and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the kind of use for it. Or if you just want to indicate a spare breaker, which doesn't even show up in the list, you can just say, okay, I'm just going to put in a circuit breaker.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of answers another question, because there's always this this gray area of what you show on a one line versus what you don't show on a one line, and I know that's entirely up to the preference of the firm.
Yeah.
So that, I guess that kind of provides an opportunity for doing that. If you had like a single circuit or something that just you wanted to show on the one line for some reason.
Yeah. Or a lot of people just want to show the spaces that aren't being used. So if you want to do that, you can put one in, a copy, and you can, obviously at this point, put as many in there as you want. So then they're just being shown that, hey, there's these extra spaces, we're not using them. Thank you for watching today's Design Master training. Contact us with questions or comments by calling 866-516-9497 or emailing support@designmaster.biz.